A lot of entrepreneurs don't begin with a grand business plan. Sometimes they begin with a layoff, a book idea, a little fear, a little curiosity, and the need to figure things out before the rent comes due. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Today's guest, Liz H. Kelly, knows that path well. After writing and promoting her own dating book, Liz discovered the power of publicity firsthand. Later, after leaving the corporate world, including a role at MySpace, she took the leap into entrepreneurship and built Goody PR, an agency focused on helping people magnify their good through positive publicity. Liz is also the author of the new book, Award-Winning Publicity, 8 Media Boosters to Magnify Your Story, a practical guide for small business owners, entrepreneurs, authors, and thought leaders who want to get their story out there without assuming publicity is only for big brands with big budgets. In the first part of our conversation, we'll talk about Liz's entrepreneurial journey, including the leap from corporate life to agency founder, why she worked for free for a year, and what she had to learn the hard way. Then, in the second part, we'll shift into her expertise, what entrepreneurs misunderstand about PR, how to find your media-worthy story, and how to show up better in interviews, whether that's TV, print, radio, or podcasts like this one. And it all begins right now. Stick around. You know, Liz, I'd like to say no pressure, but I've just built you up to be a media expert. So there's the pressure. I'm handing the pressure over to you.
That is a lot of pressure, but that was a great intro. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for agreeing to be my guest. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Before I dig into all these questions I have in my head to ask you, let's start with a little bit of an icebreaker. What do most people who know you not know about you?
Great question. I think what most people don't know about me is that I am a closet Hallmark Channel fan. So when Saturday night, I can't wait till the new Hallmark movie comes out. They have one every Saturday night at 8 p.m. and I will either record it or watch it live.
It's so funny you said that. I interviewed an attorney, a male attorney, yesterday, and his answer to that question was, I love crime dramas and Lifetime movies. And very similar to Hallmark movies, right? And I'm just like, wow, there you go. Okay. Quite diverse interests in terms of, media that he likes to consume. But yeah, my wife likes all those Hallmark movies, particularly around the holidays. That's her favorite time of year. And so she's just glued to those. And it's funny because I'll kind of walk by and I'll look and I'm like, didn't you see that one already? It's because it seems like the same story, just different actors and, different variations of very formulaic. But it works. It works.
It works.
And it's pretty decent production and pretty decent acting. It's not bad. It's mostly B-list celebrities that are in it, but they do a good job. It is well produced for sure.
Yeah, and I really started watching it during the pandemic because during the pandemic, they stopped making movies. And I had seen everything on HBO. And I had a girlfriend who actually is a screenwriter, and she had written a movie for Hallmark. And so that was my only exposure to Hallmark. And then, during the pandemic, I thought, well, okay, I'll just check this out. And what I love about the Hallmark movies is they're mostly romantic comedies, a lot of Christmas, but there's always a happy ending. So there's no anxiety, there's no stress, and it's just a feel-good experience. So that's why I'm addicted to Hallmark movies.
Yeah, well, that's in today's day and age. There's probably something to say for predictably good endings. So let's go back in time a little bit. You started by writing a dating book, of all things. How did that eventually lead into starting a PR agency?
Sure. Well, I was called Dr. Liz in high school because I had a very serious boyfriend who was really cute. He looked like the young Elvis, and he was an All-American lacrosse player, and we dated for 5 years. So everybody came to me for dating advice during high school.
There you go.
And you fast forward to, it was actually 9/11. I was in New York. I had a lot of financial services clients, and like UBS, Payne Weber, and Aon, and Smith Barney. And it was a really tough week. And so a friend of mine told me, write down what happened. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, write down what happened and it'll make you feel better. So it was kind of like a diary I wrote that was 20 pages about the week of being a stranded business traveler in New York. And then 3 months later, I got laid off like many people. And I decide, okay, I'm going to write that book that I never had time to write. And so they told me, write something positive, something that makes you feel good. So I said, okay, I'm going to write a dating book.
Dr.
And what
Liz.
was Dr. Liz, but what was funny was I had moved from the East Coast to Los Angeles, and the dating scene out here was really hard and really different. So I started making up these man codes for the different personality types. And I said, oh, all I'm meeting are WDs, wounded divorcees, who freak out when I say the word relationship. And all I want to find is a BA, a bachelor available. Anyway, this whole thing turned into people calling me from all over saying, what type is my boyfriend? And I made up 26 man codes, a complete A to Z alphabet, turned it into a compatibility guide. And that was the media gold that really leapfrogged my PR background, because I went to a lot of seminars, I went to a lot of coffee meetings saying, how do you write a book? How do you get an agent? How do you get a publisher? And I learned through the process, and I hired 2 publicists, and I took money out of my IRA to pay for them. And then I realized I was really good at it. So leapfrog forward to working at MySpace. And now we have 2008, the Great Recession hits, and I get laid off again. And I say, okay, I'm going to start my own PR agency because I'm obviously very good at this. I just have to do it for other people now. And that was a big leap because I didn't know what I was doing, and I got a lot of help because I knew investing in your future was really smart. So I invested $5,000, and I went to a Rich Dad conference hosted by Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad. So $5,000 for a 3-day weekend on entrepreneurship. And I said, whoever's crazy enough to spend $5,000 for 3 days, those are my clients. And those people in that room became my first clients. And there's a lot more to the story, but that was the leap of faith that I took. And I'm so grateful that I did it. I should have done it earlier.
I'm going to hazard to guess, you can confirm or deny, that there is a lot of similarity between dating and man codes and PR and, I don't know, client codes. There's probably different objectives, different personality types, but the goal in many ways is similar, right? It's attracting the right people. It's making a connection. It's personal. All PR is personal, in my opinion. It should be. If it's not, to me, it's bad PR. Do you see, did that ever strike you before? Did you see any similarity, in a high level between writing a dating book and then, starting your own PR firm?
Well, I think you just brought up a really great point that I haven't thought through enough, but I do have a network of PR professionals, and we talk all the time and we brainstorm and we all deal with different personality types of different people. So the people I like to work with the most are the ones who are confident, they're successful, they're running a business, but they don't have a PR team in-house. But they trust me to know what I'm doing. We have regular conversations. If I call them, they pick up the phone. So I have to think about what is that called? But it's a successful, confident business person. And P.S. If they have a book, it's even better because the book gives them authority and credibility and makes them a lot more desirable to pitch media to. But that's a really interesting question, and everything in this world is about relationships and
Mm-hmm.
relationship
Yep.
management.
Yep.
So there are times where you want to just scream, and I have to calm down and go for a walk or call a friend and talk myself off the ledge, and then go back and figure out, okay, what is the win-win solution here? What's the practical solution? And it's about setting boundaries. I mean, you have to set boundaries with clients because you have contracts and you have a scope of work, and I tend to go above and beyond a lot, but now I'm going to start to take um, some of those things that I do that are extra, and start calling them extra services, and put a price tag on them.
Monetize it. Yeah. You were working in the corporate world, including a stint at MySpace, before starting Goody PR. Was there a particular moment when you just kind of realized, this epiphany maybe, that you're just going to have to build something of your own?
I think the biggest epiphany came to me when I worked for Paramount Pictures, which was the job before MySpace, because right after I started working for them, they merged with DreamWorks. And I was working in home entertainment, and I had a senior director job. I was making a good salary, all kinds of stuff. But people told me, oh, Liz, this happens in the entertainment world all the time where they have these mergers and then they lay off a bunch of people, as part of the transition. So, I live in LA, I live near Hollywood, and there's a lot of people in the entertainment world, and their whole ego is based on that they work in the entertainment world. And so in this case, the people that worked at Paramount Pictures were freaking out about this merger, and they were all worried that they were going to lose their job and basically lose their identity. And I remember having this epiphany and saying to somebody, well, what is your biggest purpose in life? What is that bigger why outside of working for Paramount Pictures? And they looked at me and they said, Liz, that's the most healthy thing I've heard all day. And when they said that to me, I was like, I'm onto something. This is what I have to be thinking about, not freak out if I lose my job, but just think about, I'm having success writing this dating book, and how can I turn that into a bigger why?
You just talked about attending the Rich Dad conference in Arizona with Robert Kiyosaki. Besides being able to pick up some clients, what did that experience unlock for you?
Well, it was so great because, first of all, they were high-fiving me and saying, congratulations, you got out of the rat race. That's a big phrase that Robert Kiyosaki uses, getting out of the 9 to 5 rat race where you're just working for a paycheck and being dependent on somebody else. So that was new to me. Then the other thing that I got out of it was how to create a company, because I didn't know how to create a corporation. And so I created an S Corp. And years down the road, I took a reporter out to lunch, and he said, oh, these self-employment taxes are killing me, Liz. And I said, what are you talking about? So I went back to the person who taught me how to set up this corporation, and they said, oh, because you set up this S Corp, you don't have to pay self-employment taxes. So that was a huge thing. They also taught me how to create a team. So I have a bookkeeper, I have a tax accountant, I have a legal system that I use, all kinds of framework things that you don't have to worry about. if you work for a company, because somebody else is doing all that for you, all of a sudden I had to learn how to do. So it wasn't as scary because I was surrounded by these successful entrepreneurs who told me this is what you need to do. The other thing is, one of my first clients was Robert Kiyosaki's tax advisor, who wrote a book called Tax Free Wealth. His name is Tom Wheelwright. And basically, he taught me that I can write off almost everything as a business expense, and how to do that and how to make it a legitimate tax write off. So I've saved a lot of money in taxes just by being surrounded by all these entrepreneur CEOs who taught me so much.
Yeah, see, I missed that seminar. When I started my business, I left my employer and started a competitive business in the same space in the electronics industry. And I got greeted in my parking lot one day by a guy in a tracksuit with an envelope that said 3 words: "You've been served." That's when I hired my first lawyer. A little late in the game once a lawsuit has been filed against you. But nonetheless. And the same with bookkeepers to accountants to CPAs to CFOs to all the controllers. I always stepped up a little bit too late, right? Because I bootstrapped my company. I invented some tech that we still build today. That was 34 years ago. And I did it from my garage. I just, it was vaporware. It just like, I made it up and built it out of my garage and bootstrapped it. And so in that mentality, which is not uncommon for many entrepreneurs, we just do everything ourselves. A, because we don't have the money, and B, because we think we're God's gift to business and we think we know everything because we don't know what we don't know, right? So, it's like, how hard could it be? Come on, I got the tech down. How hard can business be? Well, a lot harder than anyone would have convinced me it would be. But good for you. I can see that's a huge takeaway. That's a huge lesson to get those things in order. And it's not that costly because you can do a lot of it today on a fractional basis. So you can have access to the skills that are required without having to commit to, 40-hour-a-week positions for that. You can grow into that, but at least someone's got your back, which is pretty wise. You worked for free for about a year to build your PR agency. That's not too unusual. In fact, maybe it's unusual that it was only a year. Looking back, what was that sacrifice necessary? Could you have paid yourself, or was all the financial energy going other places? Or would you advise a new entrepreneur to approach that differently today? Do you regret sacrificing for the first year at least, or would you do it differently? What advice would you give on that subject?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because it was really tough to work for a year for free. It came out of the Rich Dad Conference because they talked about how you have to work for free to master your skill and get mentors and get people to help you. And the challenge I faced was that I had done all this PR for my dating book, but I didn't have a portfolio of clients to show people, hey, I've done it for other people. So I met the people that were running Rich Dad Hawaii, which Robert was franchising at the time. He's not doing it now, but he had a group in Honolulu and they were at that conference, and I was going to Honolulu for vacation in 2 weeks. So they said, well, when you come out here, come to our house for dinner and let's talk about you doing PR for us as a test case, and then you can use us as an example to attract
There you
more
go.
clients. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it started. And then it led to more. And then I actually did work for Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, not that book, but one of his books briefly. And then I've worked for all of his advisors. He has 8 small business CEO advisors, and they've all been my clients at different times. So it worked out, and it was the kind of thing that they all knew each other and they would all recommend me to the other ones. So that was really important in building my business. However, I think back at, what I ended up doing was pretty much wiping out my emergency fund. And so that wasn't necessarily the smartest thing to do. I also had some unemployment coming in, and maybe I could have taken another job on the side, and maybe that would have helped so that I didn't completely wipe out the savings. But I was so focused and so dedicated that I think it paid off. And now it's 17, almost 18 years later, and some of my clients are people that were in that room that day.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good story. What was the biggest mistake or challenge that you faced in the early days of Goody PR?
Well, I think the biggest challenge was coming up with the right contract and managing the scope of work. And so I did call a lot of mentors and other people, and we exchanged contracts and exchanged rates and prices. And that was really hard in the beginning to figure out what was the right way to do it. And then hiring contractors, I learned how to come up with a contract, so to speak, and that got better through time. But I did make some mistakes in the beginning where I did have a couple clients, not many. I would say 2 clients in 17 years, so that's pretty good, not pay me. And that was not a good feeling. And the red flags were there. So that was the other thing. It was learning to see the red flags and not take a client just because I wanted to get a client. So, for example, one of the people that didn't pay us, we were writing a marketing plan for them. And they told us when we met with them, oh, we like to sue people and we don't like to pay bills. Well, we should have figured out
Hello?
this is not
They
going to be a
handed
good.
you the flag that
Yeah,
was red.
right.
Yeah.
They handed it to us. So I did that with another marketing person, and we just did not have our act together. She had recommended the contract, and anyway, so that was a big mistake, and I've gotten smarter over the years. So now I have an ironclad contract, and the ironclad contract has got me out of some situations, not many, but you can write a demand letter, and that usually will help you get paid. And you might have to write 2 letters, but usually I have never had to go to court, and I'm very good at documentation. So if there are any entrepreneurs listening, it's very important that you have a contract, that you document things, you have dates, you have timestamps on things in case anything like that ever comes up.
Yeah, I think the lesson is, and I think a lot of particularly newer entrepreneurs, people starting a business, don't fully appreciate, I didn't, was that not every client is a good client. You talked about writing a dating book. When you're a new business, you're like the wallflowers at the prom, watching the guys walk by, pick me, pick me, pick me, please pick me. And we were that way because we thought any sale is a good sale. We needed to cover payroll. We had financial expenses. We were growing, which growth is expensive, particularly in manufacturing. And I eventually came to realize that we have to date our clients. We have to choose whether we want this relationship. And the type of marketing that we put out determined who was attracted to us. And when we put out obnoxious, braggadocious, chest-pounding ads, which we did back in the day, we're the best, everyone else sucks. That pretty much that was the genre of our marketing effort. We attracted people who thought that was attractive. And that included good customers and trolls and toxic people and all of that. People who led with price, people who led with delayed payments and excuses and sometimes, no payment. So I did learn most of the important things I learned in business were first explained to me, and it sounded so counterintuitive. Like, oh, come on. Like, no is more profitable than yes in many cases. I would have made a whole lot more money a whole lot sooner if I had learned the power of that little 2-letter single-syllable word, no. But there's a fear-based mechanism. You don't want to say no because then your competitor will say yes. And all these ego-driven, fear-based driven, anger-driven decisions that just make you want to say yes to everybody. And it takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith in the process to get past that. But once you do, it's amazing. It's like, oh my God, why didn't I think of this before? Why weren't I've been told this before and I thought it was nuts. And it's the best thing that ever happened to our company. But it's a journey that pretty much every entrepreneur makes. And they usually do the same thing. They think more is more, and many times less is more. It's that counterintuitive angle. So your brand centers are, yeah, go ahead.
No, I totally agree. And I just want to add, because you made me think of this, and it's a really important thing. I did sign up for a 1-year entrepreneur program. It was with a guy named Roger Hamilton, and he's based out of Bali. So I had to go to Bali to the
Oh,
entrepreneur
tough job.
conference.
Yeah.
That was really rough. But the game changer that he gave me was, he said, Liz, you should tell people that you only take 5 VIP clients at a time. And that really helped, because it's that power of no, but it's also saying, hey, I'm not available for everybody. And there is a scarcity. So if you don't sign up with me today, you might not be able to work with me at all, because I might be maxed out. So and then what I found is, a lot of people say to me, I have one guy right now who says, I really want to work with you because everybody else sounds like they're using all these machines and it's not personal. So we're very personalized and we really care about our clients. So I think the combination of the 5 VIP clients being more personal and creating that scarcity really are effective.
Yeah, I think, one can be cynical and say scarcity is a marketing tactic. It's a gimmick, and it is in some cases. I've seen companies do it, but there's nothing scarce about their product. They just lead with the idea that, it's very, very limited. Supplies are limited. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity that happens every Tuesday. But when scarcity is based on, you want to do the best work for people, and you know what you're capable of, and you know when you've hit your limit, and not trying to be good for everybody, but trying to be the best for some. I think when that results in scarcity, that's authentic scarcity. And that's not scarcity for the sake of some advertising gimmick or marketing gimmick or psychological, mind thing. That is true. And human nature is, such that when the pandemic first happened, you couldn't buy toilet paper anywhere, right? There was a shortage of toilet paper, but there was no real scarcity. It was made up by people thinking they needed it. The factories did not cut down production. We didn't have some technical calamity that destroyed toilet paper factories. It was totally man-made, and there was nothing scarce about it organically, but we created that. And I think that when it's organic and when it's for the right reasons, so that you could be the best at what you do, you can't be the best for everybody. So I think that's when that really works. Your brand centers around the phrase "magnify good," which I love that phrase. Was that positioning clear from the beginning, or did it evolve as you figured out what kind of clients you wanted to work with?
That's a great question. It definitely evolved, because the original name of the company, which is actually the corporate name, is Sunrise Road Media. And we came up with that in Hawaii watching the sunrise, which of course was beautiful.
Yeah.
We wanted to uplift people, but it just wasn't intuitive. And I had created this other thing called the Goody Awards, and now I run the Goody Business Book Awards. So I run a book award program, and I close pretty much the Goody Awards. But the Goody Awards was to recognize people doing good, and people loved the name and they loved the brand. And I just couldn't figure out how to monetize it. And so I went to dinner with some people, and they said, this is your brand, this Goody brand. And so then I decided to change Sunrise Road Media to Goody PR.
Goody is the perfect word for the name of an award. I want a goody. I mean, that just, it's like an Oscar,
Right.
It's Academy Award, but they call them Oscars. And I want a goody. That just makes perfect sense, like a Clio or something. It makes a lot of sense, or a Tony. Your new book is called Award-Winning Publicity. There's, for my viewing audience, there's a picture of the book on the screen. For my listening audience, go to the podcast app and you'll see a link to the book there in the show notes. The full title of the book is Award-Winning Publicity, 8 Media Boosters to Magnify Your Story. Why did you decide that this was the right book to write right now?
Great question. Well, Award-Winning Publicity was inspired by a campaign that I did that actually won 6 PR industry awards. And it was such a phenomenon, this campaign. It was for Eclipse glasses. It was tied to the 2024 total solar eclipse for the people that make the Eclipse glasses. And I couldn't remember anything from science class really about eclipses, so I had to go back and study everything. And the beginning of my corporate background was training and development. So that's been a great skill to have in the PR world, because I could take any topic and turn it into a fun story. So basically, I researched the eclipses. We came up with 10 different topics, and we got them 54 TV interviews in only 8.5 months. And I just want to emphasize that is such an incredible volume that's normally what I would get somebody in 5 years, and we got it in 8.5 months. And the 22 of the 54 were in the last week leading up to the eclipse. So it was everybody divide and conquer, CEO, COO, CMO, everybody was doing interviews. We had a couple other spokespeople as well. And it was just an incredible campaign. So that was the inspiration. And then I did research on what is award-winning publicity. And I think this is really important because a lot of people don't know this. So there are 3 parts of award-winning publicity. Number 1 is positive press, but it supports a specific business goal. And the Eclipse glasses people wanted to sell 75 million Eclipse glasses, which they actually did. So the campaign was just incredible with that number 1 element. Number 2 is you want positive press that makes an emotional connection and increases the positive feeling or the positive sentiment about your brand. So everything we were doing was positive press about how these Eclipse glasses can protect your eyes and help you not go blind when you're looking at an eclipse, which is obviously very important.
And I'm going to guess, just a wild guess, that maybe the third part has maybe something to do with magnifying and measuring wins. Am I right?
It does, but the third part is actually getting third-party validation.
Ah, okay.
So third-party validation, you need to be able to magnify and measure, because to win these 6 PR industry awards, I had to submit all these numbers about, how many interviews did you get? What was the business impact? that all contributed to getting that third-party validation. But third-party validation can also be just earned media. And a lot of people don't even know what earned media is. So let me just explain.
Yeah.
Earned media is TV, radio, print, and podcast, but it's for free because you earn the respect of the reporter to tell your story. So that means the reporter fell in love with your story so much that they want to tell it for free. And then there is a assumption, for example, if you're on TV, that you're giving them great content that then they can get advertisers. So they're making money on the advertising on earned media. So that's the third part. So positive press tied to specific business goals, um, and then media that increases the positive feeling about your brand, and then third party validation for award winning publicity. And so there are tons of case studies in this book, not just about Eclipse glasses, that include all three elements.
What's the biggest misunderstanding entrepreneurs have about PR in general?
The biggest misunderstanding that a lot of entrepreneurs have about PR is that they want to tell a story about how great their company is versus how can they help the audience. So what I mean is you want to share tips that can help people versus, hey, I'm the greatest Eclipse glasses company in the world, because we already knew that. But the fact that these Eclipse glasses, the pitch that got the most attention was how they made the Eclipse glasses and tested them to make sure that they were going to protect your eyes. Because a lot of people could talk about why you have to wear Eclipse glasses, but not everybody could talk about how they're made and how they're tested. And how they're tested increases the confidence of the people to wear the Eclipse glasses. Now, I'll give you another example. I have worked with somebody who's a realtor, and they wrote a book called Mindset in Motion. And it's a great book about how you have to get out there and network. But the secret sauce was her lock-in morning routine, which she does every day, which includes meditation, hydration, and vibration. She gets on a vibration plate. And it was her specific formula, and it included tips to help people get their day started. So that was something unique. You always want to have a unique story and something with tips. And it's not all about you. It's about how can you help the other people.
Yeah. I would think that a lot of small business owners, particularly, think there's nothing newsworthy about themselves, right? That's just like, I build widgets or something. How do you help someone? You talk about earned media. How do you help someone find the story that a reporter or a podcast host or an audience might actually really care about?
Great question. Well, a lot of what I do is try to talk to people about what's their personal why or their personal backstory, because that makes them unique and different. So I'll give you another example. A guy, it's another real estate person. He coaches people on how to invest in real estate, and he wrote a fictional book called The Wise Investor, and it was about a 50-year-old who quit his job and became a real estate investor. So that's a good story, but the why behind it, and the why that this guy did what he did, was because he was a cancer survivor and he had overcome cancer, right? And that was his epiphany and his wake up call, that he had to get out of the corporate world and he had to change his life. And so I told him, his name is Rich Fettke. I said, Rich, you need to write a preface to your fictional book about that story and about your personal why. And so he called me up and thanked me profusely. He said, Liz, I wrote the preface, and that is the number one story that people want to talk about. is how he overcame cancer and how that was his epiphany to change his life. So a lot of times it's in that personal why story that can help people have a personal story, because the media doesn't want to hear about your perfect life. They just don't
Right.
want to hear it. They want to
Right.
hear, hey, I didn't get paid, or hey, I overcame this huge obstacle and here's how I did it. Because that makes you human, that makes you relatable.
Yeah, that's for sure. What separates a good media pitch from one that just gets ignored? I'm sure news agencies and producers and publishers and all of that, podcast hosts and producers for podcasts get pitched all the time. I do. We get pitched all the time. And I know what I like. I know what I want the show to be. I know the types of people I think would be of interest to my audience. But what's your take on that? You have a much wider perspective on it, because my perspective is pretty narrow. What makes a good pitch a good pitch?
Well, great question. I think one of the things that I try to emphasize in a good pitch is using the word unique. And I can't emphasize that enough. So, in other words, if I had a doctor client, she was a ER doctor, and she did a study on wisdom. And so she came out with 8 elements that contribute to wisdom. So that's a unique story because she did a unique study, and then she could talk about the results. And her backstory was also unique because she had run into some health challenges. She got an autoimmune disease. She had to quit being an ER doctor. And then she said, okay, I'm going to use my research skills and do a study. So there was this whole unique story. And then you take it to an even higher level, and this is an unfortunate situation, but it worked out where she got media interviews. So she lived in the Pacific Palisades, and if you live in the United States, you probably saw they had a horrific fire in January 2025 that
Yeah.
pretty much wiped out most of the Palisades, including
Yeah.
her home. So I said to her, and we had many conversations about this because obviously it was a very emotional time, so we weren't really pitching at first. It was just like, okay, let's let her, just deal with this loss, find a new place to live, deal with her emotions. But then she came back to me and she said, Liz, I'm using my wisdom skills to help me overcome this tragedy. So her wisdom skills were things like resilience, positivity, humility, kindness. And so we ended up pitching that story, and that landed her a national story on a PBS show. And then she also got some other coverage on local TV, which was also really important. So I think it's being human, being humble. That's what is going to make the pitch stand out versus, oh, I got all the answers, and just have me on to tell you how to uh, create a law firm. Okay, that is, forget it. That is boring. Now I've got one more story I'll share with you that is really cool about a attorney. So this attorney just came out with a new book. It's called Green Book's Book of Law, and it's law basics through the eyes of a friendly golden doodle, right? So it's this golden doodle that's sitting in Ernie the attorney's office, and he's learning all these things about the law. And then the dog is teaching the law basics by telling the stories. And this book is for primarily teens through young adults to help them learn law basics about family law, torts, which is bad behavior, and they learn the legal consequences, but it's all taught through this friendly dog. And so that kind of story has what I would call sex appeal because it's unique, it's fun, people like dogs, and it's different. I don't know anybody else who's a lawyer who came up with this concept. So check it out, Greenback's Book of Law.
That's great. And who wouldn't trust a doodle? Yeah, we used to have a Labradoodle, and by the way, I'm not too far from you. I'm about 30 miles south of you, as we speak. You teach media training, among other things. What are the 3 practical tips that can help someone connect better during TV, radio, print, podcast, whatever medium they're participating in?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people, they think, oh, I don't need media training, especially if they've been a CEO or a GM and they've managed a lot of people. But being on TV in a 3-minute interview and being clear, concise, and compelling is a lot harder than it looks. So I just gave the guy with the Golden Doodle book, his name is Ted Sutton, media training last week. And some of the tips that I gave him would be to relax. It's a conversation. Smile, and that 80% of what is going on TV is your body language.
Mm-hmm.
So you always want to be confident. So it's a conversation. Look for your body language, and then talk in 3s. So it's great that you asked about 3 key points, because in Award-Winning Publicity, I talk about the rule of 3s. And the reason why you want to talk in 3s is because if I sat here and I told you 10 things to remember about
the law of
media
17,
training,
you're going to lose them.
Your brain would just get overwhelmed, and you would say, what did she say? And so if you can say, for example, I just said you want to be clear, concise, and compelling. If you can use sentences like that, then it can register and people can remember that. And so those would be my top media training tips.
Excellent. We're almost out of time, so just a couple more questions. For an entrepreneur with limited time, speaking of time, and limited budget, which is like every new entrepreneur out there, what is the first PR move that they should consider making?
Great question. Well, the first thing they should do is get my book, Award-Winning Publicity, because it's a lot cheaper than working with me. But the second thing is, the first chapter, I talk about finding your story magic, or your wow story. And we've been talking a lot about that with some of these examples. The wow story is what makes you unique, what makes you different. You really need to brainstorm with that, because once you figure that out, it's like a domino effect, and you can get a lot of interviews.
Yeah, that's good advice. And finally, how did you define success before this journey into what became Goody PR? And how do you define it now?
That's a tough one. I think, I always wanted to make a positive impact. I remember 9 years old at summer camp getting an award and for making a positive impact, and just it made such a big impression on me, and it was a great camp. But so that's kind of been a theme throughout my life. But now with success, I'm really happy if my clients can tie their business goals to the publicity that I get them. But I get so excited when a client gets an interview, and I will do things like, I had a client on CNN, and I will get up at all hours. I got up at 2 a.m. to support their live East Coast TV interview that was at 5 a.m. And they said to me, Liz, you're crazy. You don't have to get up. I said, yes, I do, because there's always breaking news. And if you get cut or the time moves, this is live TV. I want to be up and be ready. So I truly, it's real. It's authentic. I get really excited for them. And that's success to me.
Excellent. Good answer. Well, to my audience who would like to get more information on Liz, Goody PR, if you're watching this on YouTube, right down here, right below me, it says see more. Click that and the URL will be there, and you can find out More about Liz's company, Goody PR, and a link to the book will be there as well. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, don't do it while you're driving. We don't want to lose any subscribers. Not that way. When it's safe to do so, go to your podcast app, click on the show notes, and all that information will be there as well. Liz H. Kelly, thank you for being my guest today. This has been great. I love the whole subject of PR and marketing. I think many people view it as a kind of a black art, and filled with spells and witchcraft and whatever stuff they don't understand. But I really think it's not. I really think it's basic human psychology and a level of just being authentic and being real. And I think real is far more interesting than the hype people make up, than the persona that people put forward. And in today's entrepreneurial world, so many business gurus will say, you just got to fake it till you make it. There might be some truth to that, but you can't fake it into publicity. You can't fake PR. People, particularly modern audiences, young people, and you become your father when you start any sentence with kids these days, but I'll become my father, kids these days. They're savvy. They don't fall for generic press releases and magazine print ads the way we did. We grew up on print media. I grew up on print media. They grew up on screens. They grew up with influencers. They grew up with channels where they can seek out their own advice and look for people who they can trust and connect with. And for better or for worse, we can argue till the cows come home about what so-called influencers have done, but that's the reality today. And I learned that even at my ripe old age, in my business for 34 years, that I can create content and I can influence people and I can become an authority-based influencer. MySpace, it just have to be real. You have to be authentic, and you have to do it with a different mindset. And none of my content ever has a call to action, because my call to action is, trust me, I won't steer you in the wrong direction. I will give you best practice, non-commercial advice in a very commercial, technical world. And I think once we get to that level, people trust what we say. And through this thing I like to call guided discovery, when people come up with the solution themselves based on data and guidance that they've received from people they trust, they fall on the sword over that product. They become members of a tribe, not just a customer. And we've seen it with companies like Apple, maybe not so much today, but more classic Apple under Jobs, and Patagonia and similar type companies where people just join the tribe. They buy their merch. Nike proved that by running decades worth of ads that didn't even talk about their shoe. They celebrated athleticism, and the shoe was just in the picture, right? And they own the shoe business for a long time, if they don't still. So I think this being authentic and knowing there's an interesting part of everyone's story, and people do like a good story. You like Hallmark movies because it's a good ending. And I think there's a lot of good endings out there with people who start a business. There's a story behind it worth telling. And they have dreams and hopes, and they think they can do something better. They think they can change the world, and they risk everything to do it. And I think that alone makes any entrepreneur a great subject for media attention, because we all have those stories that largely go untold. So I think there's so much opportunity for people that are starting businesses, that have a business, to, if they think that media exposure would be good for them, which I can't see why it wouldn't, but if they do agree with that, I think the world is their oyster if they're real, and work with someone like yourself that can give them the proper training so they don't ruin their 15 minutes of fame, on one bad interview and then get blacklisted. So I think it's really important to get some training, but also to open themselves up to being vulnerable, sweating in front of a camera, dealing with the imposter syndrome, doing all that, because that's what real people are. To me, it just makes perfect sense. So thanks for doing what you do.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. And I just want to add a couple things with what you just said. And one is, I want to emphasize that getting publicity is not easy. It is hard. So if you leap into this, don't get discouraged. don't give up. It's like sales. You just have to keep trying. You have to keep brainstorming different topics and don't give up. But the other thing I agree with is everybody does have a story, so you just have to keep figuring out how to tell that story. And the last thing I want to say is that earned media, which is this somebody else telling your story, is actually worth 3 times the value of any paid ad because
Yeah.
it's more authentic, because it's somebody wants to share your story. And so somebody else vouching for you, that is media gold, and that's what you want. So it's worth it, even though you might want to pull your hair out at certain points, but just don't give up and keep trying.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. I didn't mean to assume that it's easy. My point was it's valuable. You've got a valuable story. We all have valuable stories that are of general interest to people. And getting that story out is where your expertise, that's where we realize it's not easy. And there are a lot of, particularly with podcasts are still kind of the Wild West of media. I turn down more appearance requests on podcasts than I accept by far. Not because I'm snobby, but because if it's poor production value, if someone's just phoning it in, if they're not doing any research, or if they're not, if it's just, any podcast that starts with "Tell me who you are, tell me your name, and tell me what you do." No, I pass, because I want someone truly interested in my story because they think their audience would benefit from it. So it's not easy. There's a lot of sharks out there, and they just want to fill spot and produce another episode and cash their check, and that's not good. So it does take someone with experience like yourself to parse out the wheat from the chaff and all of that.
I mean, it is totally possible for people to do it on their own, but and we're happy to help if anybody wants to work with us. But I just stress that with every interview, because my first media coach with the dating book, they said, don't ever go on TV and say dating is easy, because it's not. And nobody wants to hear dating is easy. So I like to stress that PR is hard. It is a process, but you can do it. And I'm a cheerleader. I'm a big cheerleader of I'm not going to give up, and you just got to keep trying.
Yeah, if you don't believe, Liz, that you can do it, she did. So, and she got some support. She reached out. She went to some trainings and talked to experts, and now she's the trainer and she's the expert. So it definitely works. Well, Liz, thanks again for the generosity of your time. I hope our paths cross again, and continued success in your business journey.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and good luck to all the entrepreneurs and the authors out there. And I'm here to cheerlead you if you want.
All right, you got a cheerleader in your corner. Liz H. Kelly, thanks for being a great cheerleader, and thanks again for being my guest. Okay, here's some final thoughts. I think one of the most valuable themes from Liz's story is that visibility doesn't usually happen by accident. It comes from knowing your story, understanding who it serves, and having the discipline to put that story in front of the right people over and over again. For entrepreneurs, that's an important lesson. We often think publicity is about ego, attention, or chasing headlines. But at its best, publicity is really about connection. It's about helping the right people understand who you are, what you do, why it matters, and why they should trust you. And Liz's journey also reminds us that sometimes the thing that launches a business is not certainty. It's a moment of disruption, a willingness to learn, and the courage to build credibility before the market fully knows who you are. Now, that's a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We've been very busy recording future episodes with amazing guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, we'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com, where you can apply or recommend a guest, or just learn more about the show. And don't forget to check out my newest series, Reluctant Lessons When Businesses Go Wrong. On this series, we dig into high-profile business failures and, most importantly, the story behind it all. We've already profiled several companies with many more in the way. As it turns out, there's no shortage. check out Reluctant Lessons on this channel. And if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon, and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. And finally, to everyone listening or watching, if you find yourself stepping into entrepreneurship, whether by choice or by circumstance, remember this: sometimes the path we never planned becomes the journey we were meant to take. That's it. I'm out of time. Thanks so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you, and I'll see you again soon.